Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7:30. You ready, Val? Yes. In attendance for the board, we have Janet, Alan, Chow, Ginny, Lynn, who just stepped out, Sherry, Nancy, Dick, Milton, Andy. And for senior staff, we have Susan. We'll remind everyone that this is our board meeting, and it is being recorded and also streamed to the internet. Also remind folks of our civility principles. Speak kindly, don't speak ill. Accept and give constructive criticism. Apologize earnestly. Respect others' opinions. Respect other people's time. Announcements to close special meetings to be held. None except, it's the end of the agenda. You'll see a list. Approval of the agenda is a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Ginny moved and Nancy seconded. Any discussion?
I have a question about, you sent a note that said you'll notice, that paraphrase, you'll notice the agenda is light because of the closed meeting afterwards.
Well, also because we're not doing the president's objectives.
But what you said was because of the closed meeting. So my question is, what's the relationship in time in terms of when this agenda was approved by the BOC and the decision to have a closed meeting?
They were both done at the same time. We knew at the BOC that there was going to be a closed meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, all those in favor of the agenda? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, disclosures of conflicts of interest. None have been disclosed to me. So, Valerie, for residents speak out. Thank you. First up, we have Brian England. Brian, please come up. Welcome, Brian.
Hi, Brian England from 11915 Gold Needle Way. I'm here tonight to talk on behalf of the Guildford Industrial Park Business Group that got together.
Excuse me, Brian.
Oh, okay. Is that better? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
cool.
much better.
Okay,
Big difference.
right. Well, I brought this along. See this? This is the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle. At last, we got to the piece that really matters. This is it. And we can put it in, and we got the complete picture. Now, recently, the board adopted a resolution to take over the covenant enforcement and administration of the Architectural Committee in the balance of the business commercial areas of Columbia. Staff reported Howard Hughes was resisting this action and suggested that it be deferred to zoning rewrite. We urged the CA to take over the HRD Architectural Committee responsibilities, commencing with the East Guildford Industrial Park immediately. Please authorize your staff to act immediately to complete this process. I directed Chris Oliva to prepare an amendment to terminate HRD's capacity to act as the Architectural Committee and replace it with the CA. Mr. Oliva delivered a draft amendment to the staff and board, and we're ready to move forward. After we receive your comments, I'll have our attorney prepare a package to deliver to the property owners for their execution and record the amendment when at least 50% of the owners are signed off. The draft amendment was delivered on May 31st. Please advise me when I can expect CA comments. We'd like to get this process done in 30 days. Now I'd like to give you an overview of how the Columbia Newtown development process complements the Howard County development process and how this process broke down. All Newtown business and industrial parks, shopping centres and village centres have a design and development guideline. And this is what it looks like. This is the development guideline. Every single thing, there's an office one, and we got copies of them all. We got them from Howard Hughes Corporation. Nancy Tucker was very helpful in that. Okay, let me get back to where I was. Okay, so they've all got guidelines. The Howard County Department of Planning and Zoning requires the developer to conform with those design development guidelines. This is enforced by the Howard County Department of Inspections, Licenses and Permits. Under their rules, that occupancy permits can only be issued if the form found on the back of the design and development guidelines is completed by the architectural committee and submitted with the application. And this is what the form looks like. It's on the back of the guidelines. The architectural committee reviews Columbia Newtown development to ensure it conforms with the design and development guidelines. When the development is completed, it inspects what the development and fills out the form that is found on the back of the design and development guidelines. The process closely follows the residential development process, so the CA will be responsible for the business and industrial parks, just like the various villages have their own architectural committees and are responsible for their villages. This process is still in place. Both Val Lasdin, DPZ, and Robert Francis, DILP,
Brian, you have to wrap it up.
have been informed and acknowledged this fact. Robert Francis admitted that they have not been following it. Unfortunately, as others have testified numerous times in the last 6 years, the system broke down. This is the first step getting back on track. Other areas to be assumed in the course of this would be probably, next one would be Oakland Ridge. And that's the end. Do you have any questions?
Any questions, Brian? Chow.
So, Brian, thanks for coming here. I have one question. You said CA staff proposed to defer the commercial conflict enforcement. And what does that mean? I thought we were going through the process. We're going to do something. Instead, we're not doing anything at all?
Well, you know, they've had our paperwork for over a month now, and we haven't had a response. And that's what we're asking for, is to go forward. We're prepared to take over the covenants, then transfer the covenants in the architectural committee and immediately transfer them to the CA. Now, the reason we want to do that, we could keep it ourselves, but the problem is we need an institution that's going to be around for a long time. And you can imagine in a business park, there's different owners and things like this. We've already seen the Oakland Ridge one fall apart. And so, they took over their covenants. But of course, what has happened is, as time's gone by, then that's all fallen apart. And it's rather like what's happened in the county. You know, all the pieces are there. It's just they've just not been following the regulations.
Any other questions? Alan?
I just want to be clear. When you say we, who is we?
Oh, you mean the we as far as the...
We are ready to do this. We are ready to
Oh,
do
okay.
that.
Yeah, the we. Let me tell you all the we. I've got a list. I've got a list of the we's.
Well, in general.
Okay, so it's different property owners in the EGU. So it's like Metropolitan Rolling Door, St John Properties, Broken Land Business Park, Bernstein Management Corporation, Associated Plumbing, Environmental Systems, Havatech. So
For me, it was
a big we.
Guilford Industrial Park,
Yeah.
East Guilford.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear. This group has gotten together and said,
Yes.
we're ready for this to happen.
Yes.
And you can either do it solely on your own,
You're right. Correct.
or you could have us come in and sort of be in the umbrella group that this would be subsumed under.
Yes, and that's what we sent. Chris has sent all the paperwork to Milton and the staff, so they know about it. Yes, that's exactly what we do. In fact, this was first recommended to us about 4 years ago by Bob Jenkins, but we didn't realise quite the connection between the covenants and the architectural committee. And the reason the connection is in the covenants it says there has to be an architectural committee, so it's identical to a village.
Thank you.
Yeah. How many owners are there in this industrial park?
Let me
And
see if Chris
how
knows.
many-
We have the whole list. I think
Well-
it's about 20.
All right, when you get a chance, rather than guess, if you could
Oh.
let us know. And then
That's about right.
20 owners?
There's more than that
Well, no,
because a
you
lot
could-
have been condominiumized, but there's 20 parcels.
Well, you can send us that number.
sure.
What I'm getting at is how many owners are in the industrial park? How many are involved in wanting this to happen? And is there something in some covenants or something on the land that says X number of the owners have to agree,
50, over 50%.
over 50%.
Yeah, so 50%. The reason we didn't do it originally, because we thought it was 75%. So when we got the list of owners, we thought that was going to be very difficult. Now, of course, as a board, you could suggest that the CA join us because they are property owners in our industrial park. That would simplify matters even more because that would make it easier to get to the 50%.
Are you close to the 50%?
I think we're on it at the moment, but it'd be nice if the CA joined us. There's no reason why not.
So you can get me that exact number and.
Yes,
okay.
absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have Chris Saliba. Chris? Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should hire somebody who can do this for you.
I got 2 copies.
Chris, before you start,
Yes, sir.
is it possible also to send the board a copy of this?
Oh, most
electronically?
certainly.
Yeah, I mean, because there's no way I can read the
Andy, I'm sorry.
But, okay, welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Don't lean too close to the mic.
Okay,
It
thank
gets
you.
fuzzy.
I'm just here to supplement what Brian said and add a few things, and I'll be very brief. I just made a little graphic here for a little bit of levity, and we're going to get back, and we're not going to go to tomorrow never knows because that's where we've been, and we're going to let it be. But what I have here also is the map of the architectural covenants. It's probably too small for you. I'd actually wanted to put it on your screen, but that didn't work out. But the yellow are all controlled by Howard Research and Development. And the idea here was that they're ready to go. Brian's people are ready to go. Brian tasked me with contacting them, and I have, and they're very ready to go. They're concerned about a lot of the things that happened over there. They're not really happy that Minstrel Way was cut in because all kinds of traffic is now coming in there, and they're doing business. A Rolling Door or the Atlantic Door Control Company, they don't want to be bothered by traffic. The next thing I gave you here is just a very short flow chart, and it's pretty simple. I mean, it'll basically emphasize to everybody that when they want to come in and do something, they have to go to the architectural committee. And some things need to be updated, but everything's pretty well in place. Finally, the yellow sheet there, I just wanted to give that to you. This sheet is on the Howard County Department of Planning and Zoning website for Newtown. And this basically notifies everybody, because they have this problem too. I mean, let's be fair to them. And so they want to, especially with residents, come over there, and it's something that is a constant education problem. But just to wrap up, I don't think that it'll be a problem at all to get 50% of the people. If you all are not ready, and I can understand that, the property owners there can form a property owners association, corporation. But I do think, as Brian said, that in the end, it's better to have the organization that's going to be here in perpetuity so that it doesn't break down. And if they did establish themselves in the interim, they would add provisions allowing the eventual assumption by CA. Okay?
Thank you, Chris. Any questions? Alan?
I just want to get clear, because I wasn't clear from Brian's answer. Has the group reached the 50% mark from the people you talked to?
Yes. I don't have firm commitments. I will say, for example, at Metropolitan Rolling Door, he didn't want to take it over. So, we haven't gotten into all the details with him, because, again, the same thing that happened in Oakland Ridge.
Thank you.
Shari. And then
Chris, so looking into the future, do you see all of is your thinking that all of the industrial parks in the villages that fall under Newtown will follow this same pattern if this goes through, that will encourage other groups to do similarly in the different villages?
I think that is probably the way we suggested that Oakland Ridge would be the next one. Steve Smith, who owns a building up there, controls it now, and he admits it hasn't really been going all that well, and if you ask them, they would probably agree to it. I mean, they don't have to do anything. But, one of the problems up there is it borders Long Reach and Oakland Mills, and those people, residences up there, would be most affected.
Chow?
So, can you list any kind of properties for violating the covenant, like companies or property owners?
I apologize. I didn't exactly hear.
Can you list any companies or property owners who are violating the covenant?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you asked. A couple of weeks ago, and actually when I was here on the 12th, I just briefly reported to you all. The property owners that Brian was referring to got together and sent a joint letter to several department heads asking them to enforce the covenants, and they're doing it. We're making progress. And that was also a device or a way we got in touch with them and started to establish the dialogue.
Ginny?
Yeah. Glenmont's another community that's impacted by Oakland Ridge.
Okay.
So you're saying you could start this committee, or you guys could start this committee right away, an architectural review committee in the industrial park, right? You could start it right away.
Yeah.
And that would, I assume, consist of members that own businesses in the industrial park. The other option you're saying is it'd be CA, what would be who would serve on that committee?
In the amendment that
And one other question, would that be like one committee, architectural review type committee that would serve all of the industrial parks, not one for each one, right?
It certainly could be. The amendment that I submitted had 5 members on it, and one from King's Contrivance, one from Owen Brown, 2 property owners, and somebody from CA staff to have 5 members. That's a very important point that you make there, because obviously you have to have a certain level of efficiency. And maybe, I think one board would do it. It's not going to be that intensive of a process. It's going to be episodic, when people want to redevelop. And when the county, if they do establish a new process, right now there's no process to redevelop the industrial commercial areas of Columbia.
Well, let me just quick follow-up. One of my concerns with our current system of covenant enforcement is every village does it. Sometimes the rules are different. Sometimes the application is different depending on who serves on a rack. And I have a problem with that, frankly, because this is Columbia. I think it should be uniform. You should live, whatever village you live in. It's still, if you want to add a deck or something, it shouldn't depend on who's serving on a rack in X village. And that's not the way it functions. So when you're talking about this, I guess I'm asking, if you have every industrial park having their own architectural review, you're going to have the same problem, as opposed to one, because I don't see the difference in the industrial parks that you can't have just one committee consisting of members from each park and other staff or other appropriate individuals. But I guess, just curious.
There is only one design guideline for commercial business parks. There's another one for office parks like this. That has a different one. So they're in different categories. So you've got all the villages have one. The villages have one. The industrial parks have one. We got a copy of that. We got a copy of the one for the business, this type of business park. So there's different units, but they're in categories. Because each one of them is like a village and has a different sort of mix of uses. So I think That's what gives the guideline. And I can share with you these guidelines because I got these from Nancy Tucker, and that's what they're using now. There's only one architectural committee for businesses now. So we just assume that role, and CA would take that over. One architectural committee using the initial guides we got. But that doesn't mean you can't, because, as things change those guides. I don't think there would be anything wrong with doing that.
Okay.
But remember, our covenants, which go with the land, demand that there's an architectural committee and that it actually be active and working. And that's why we're holding the county's feet to the fire on this.
Lynn?
Is Gateway part of this? How is that treated separately?
Gateway has separate covenants, but they were modeled on the covenants for the other industrial and commercial areas. The only difference there is really that's M1, but actually the covenants are more stringent over there on land uses. These were written in 1969, and people were still getting their arms around it.
Any other questions? Alan?
Just correct it. Another difference in terms of Gateway is that that's an area that Howard Hughes has said they're not willing to give up control of.
Apparently so.
Thank you, Chris. Next up, we have Ginger Scott. Welcome, Ginger.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Ginger Scott, and I live in Wild Lake. I want to comment on the devastation recent floods have caused to Fairway Hills Golf Course. It's easy to blame Mother Nature. She can seem very capricious indeed. The CA staff knew about some of the challenges of building in the floodplain. At least 2 consultants had told them. It's not clear how well, if at all, staff apprised successive CA boards of the risks. At one point, government restrictions on disturbances in this kind of land were relaxed. CA staff presented this to the board as a window of opportunity which could close at any time. I was allowed to see the relevant minutes, but was not given the copy I requested. I think the message here is that governments may change their regulations, but Mother Nature does not simultaneously change sensitive topography. It would be very expensive to redesign and rebuild the golf course. One thing the staff could do with relatively small expense would be to reevaluate all of the buffers to streams and river to determine if they are equal to those in the golf course plans that were approved by the state and county. Where too much buffer may have been converted to rough, CA could begin some kind of reforestation. A no-mow policy in designated areas of rough would allow revegetation to occur through natural succession. Mother Nature can be very generous in allowing this to happen passively. CA could even help her along by planting saplings those that would have grown naturally along the streams. Over time, these newly forested buffers could reduce the amount and velocity of storm waters in the streams and river. While this might not impact much of the golf course, it would lessen the Patuxent's overflow into Lake Winnemuckundy and other downstream properties. Thank you.
Thanks, Ginger. Any questions? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
That's all I have on my list. Anyone else? No? Thank you very much. Chair's remarks. Written report. Just remind everyone the July work session will start at 7 p.m. All right, any questions? President's report. Milton, anything you want to say?
It's in writing to you. I want to well, first, let's deal with the President's report. Any questions related to the President's report?
Janet?
Two questions. One, the Transportation Demand Management Plan meeting, do you have any idea what time that is or where I could find that information?
I will have to get back with you. It's going to be in the Meriwether meeting room, and I don't have, I'd have to find out the time.
Okay. My second question was on the Millennial Work Group. I was wondering if we would be getting periodic updates.
Yes,
on
I think they're planning to come for a status report next month at the work session.
And will they include in that their goals, like what they're working toward?
I will check with them. I haven't been to a meeting, but Jane and Jessica is staffing that. But I know that they're planning to give a midterm, a mid-work session report.
Any other questions on Milton's report? Dick?
We were told that by Brian and that some paperwork was sent to you about this.
Well, it came to me by the way of email.
Uh-huh.
But I'm still proceeding under the board director meetings that asked me to work with. Remember, we talked about that phase 2 of the Howard County land regulations are moving forward, and we reached out to the consultant, and the consultant is working with Howard County on how they can possibly incorporate a component of looking at the covenants, and that's what I'm still working with.
Has the county chosen the?
Yes, they have.
Is it the same one as
the same one, and basically the process they've done, as opposed to having to go back out, they use the same process. Prince George's County extended the contract of Clarion, and Howard County is just tagging on to that.
Mm-hmm. So, is there a timeline on this?
I haven't seen a timeline yet.
Alan? Alan's next. I thought you didn't hear that. Okay, sorry.
I asked some questions about things that aren't on the President's report.
Oh, well, let's go to the President's report first.
I'm waiting for.
Okay, Chow and Greg.
I think for the planning, and so it's really follow what Brian and Chris said. So we're now holding the process, right? They asked us to join them. You said because they were waiting for.
Well, see, the thing about it, we don't want to do this piecemeal. We've been going through this for many months trying to figure out. There are so many different types of commercial covenants. The office park that Brian and Chris are talking about is just one of many in this community. All of them have covenants. We have been working with Howard Hughes, and we got to the point where we wanted to pursue another approach. And that's when I came to the board to ask about the next phase of the county's look at their land use regulations. We don't want to get into this doing this piecemeal in just one area at a time, because there's so many of them.
So my point is, now we have a potential partner working with us, and
There's a partner.
like for example,
They're
that
not,
group, right?
they're not a partner. They want to turn over their responsibility to us.
I would think that way, even maybe perceived that way, right? It's
Well,
working
right
with
now,
our group, right?
if they have the numbers, if they have the owners and one step we have to emphasize, they have to petition HRD, and HRD has to approve that. They haven't done that yet.
They don't have to approve it. They have no, if you get 50% of the property owner, they have to vacate.
Okay, I have to follow that up with our legal counsel, because we've done a lot of research on what's requirements are there.
So that means we should continue work with them instead of holding the process. We've got a partner there,
it's
right?
not my recommendation that we work with a single park, because there are so many of them. We don't want to do this in a piecemeal way.
So,
Wait, Greg's next.
I have one more question. So, because you said there's no timeline on this, right? Does that mean you will hold for like another 2 years or 4 years or something?
What's
your estimation?
I was asked the question, did I know the timeline when the county is going to move forward with phase 2? I'm not aware of the timeline. I know that they're planning to hire the same consultant, and they want to get started after the election.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Greg.
Yeah, thanks. I was really happy to read about this membership sales drive, the Flash Splash special. 180 new memberships.
Right.
I mean, that's fantastic. But I just want to confirm, I mean, these are real deal new. They're not renew. They are people that did not, prior to that day, hold CA memberships, and now we've got them.
Absolutely. They're brand new memberships.
And any idea the breakdown as far as, are they single facility versus fit and play versus the swim? Any idea just roughly how they break down?
Susan, do you have any idea?
Can you point me to where in the report that is?
It's on page 4. Right under communications, second paragraph under communications and marketing.
I believe they are predominantly play, but I will have to double check on that.
Okay. Well, I just want to say,
I know the promotion was to focus on play because we were down in we were getting quite a few CA fit and play, but the play was off from the previous year.
okay. I just want to say that's just absolutely fantastic. That's a great result. Just so, again, just very happy to see it. Because I hope that, I assume you did commend the people who were responsible.
Yes,
for
we
that.
did because it's part of our new sales team and it's part of getting that function, moving it forward.
Shari and then Ginny.
Well, I'd just like to add on to what Chow was saying about working with a community partner. I think what we're hearing is some real level of interest and a plan and a strategy. And rather than waiting for an election or someone else's timeline, I think it would be possible for us to take a look at the pros and cons of doing that in discussion outside of another arbitrary deadline or a set of timelines established by another entity. I think CA could take a look at this and evaluate the feasibility and what it would take to do this so that we're not caught at the end, but rather we're ahead of the wave. So when time comes to negotiate, when time comes to talk with people about possibilities, we really know what we're talking about. And I think that was a very good idea, Chow.
Well, if I may respond, I respectfully disagree. There's not a plan and a strategy because, number one, they can't say they have the requirement of the property owners to move forward. I still believe they have to reach out to HRD.
Sounds pretty...
Well, that's just his opinion. We have to verify that. We have spent a lot of time on legals internally and externally looking at all these different covenants. It's not just one office park or business park coming in and saying we're ready. It's all over this community.
So are we working on this currently?
Yes, we are, and I'm still pursuing what the board authorized me to do is work with Howard County to see with the new look at the development of the new land use regulations, how can we look at our existing covenants and possibly roll those into any new land regulations where those covenants possibly would not have to exist any longer?
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is, what I'm hearing is from the community that they would like to have CA have something to put forward actively and as an advocate for what we want, so that there is a vision there rather than respond to something else that comes up or whatever the county's vision might be, and then trying to fit our stuff into it.
Once again, Shari, I think it's a stretch to say it's the community. If you remember the report that Sherry presented, there's 44 plus or many different covenants out there, entities, and so it's a stretch to say the community is reaching out to us. We have one park, and I'm not discounting them. But I don't believe it's in our best interest to do this piecemeal. I have no problem at all if we get to the point where CA is working with the community to take over the commercial covenants. But we are not in a position right now to do that because we're not authorized to do that. And we have to look at it holistically as opposed to, in my opinion, as opposed to piecemeal.
Ginny.
Yeah, just a quick question, and you don't have to answer it now, but on follow up on Greg's point, on the 180, it's 1 week memberships, right?
No.
It says this 1 week membership off, it was 1 week membership off.
1 week effort.
Okay. Okay. What I'm interested in is, are these new people to Columbia? Are these people that, how long have they been here? Are we getting people that were here for a while and we're finally getting them with this type of offer because we've changed what we're offering? I have no idea of what the profile of the people is that, you know, are the 180 people.
Well, we
Are
have
they
a
young? Are they old? Are they
we
combination?
have a dashboard coming up one in July.
Okay, and that'll answer
And I
all
don't.
that.
I have to say what we will capture in that dashboard. We have information on the new memberships.
So the dashboard looks at the whole organization, not 180 new memberships. If you're asking if you want to know who those people are, we can do that, but I don't have.
I'm
I
just
wasn't
curious
planning
because
on
we were,
doing
you know, trying to get more millenniums. Did we get that, or did we get a senior? You know, I'm just curious as to who these people are.
I guess
Not
to me,
each
the biggest
one,
start
but in
is
general.
that we got 180 new memberships.
Yeah.
Which is great. Which is great. Okay. All right. Maybe let it go at that.
All right, any more on the report, and then we're going to go to Alan's questions to get some questions. All right, Alan.
Well, if I may, just want to quickly, related to the Downtown Columbia Partnership at your places, is the annual report for 2017. There's also a copy of the Downtown Columbia Transportation Demand Management Plan, and as Janet mentioned, there's a community meeting set for the 10th of July to discuss that. The Transportation Demand Management Plan is a requirement of the 2010 Downtown Plan.
Alan.
On the issue of the 180 new members, because we have an explicit initiative around younger people, and we have heard that we have had an issue around not capturing enough new residents who come in. I would like to see included along with the dashboard, whether it's part of the dashboard or it's a separate thing. I would like to see a breakdown on those two dimensions. Are these 180 old-time residents who are just now signing on, or are we finally starting to capture some of the new residents that we haven't been capturing before, and what's the age profile of these folks? That will help us with our initiative. I don't think we can wait for authorization. I think we need to take the lead, or a lead. We need to be out there around this whole issue of the covenants. Doesn't mean we do things without consultation, without partners, without information, but we're talking about a change in who is this part of the, if you will, the gatekeeper, the covenant enforcer for business areas. And I am absolutely not interested in having the county take over and have these covenants go away and have this all be part of zoning. That, for me, destroys Columbia as Columbia. It's what makes Columbia is that we have this special relationship around land use that's different and in addition to zoning. And for me, the question, this piecemeal question, is one way to look at it. But all of a certain type of park are under the same regime of covenants. So it's not like there are 44 different regimes of covenants. There's one for business parks, one for office parks, one for gateway. And so another, I think, equally compelling way to look at it is as a pilot, that we have an opportunity with folks who are ready to, and we could then get our feet wet, we can see how it works. We might decide, boy, this is the stupidest thing we've ever done. Let's get out of this. But by doing it, we would learn a lot. We would test the waters. I think it would generate interest in the others. If you wait for everybody to get on board, then it's like herding cats. But if we say, here's a model, we've got it, it's happening, and here's why it's successful, assuming it is, then that's pretty compelling. Question. You said you are continuing to work on this. What is the status of your review, if any, of this proposed amendment that was sent to you?
I have not
looked at it at all.
Not looked at it.
I don't recall us being, as a board, being asked what our thoughts are about CA joining in the East Guilford industrial park landowners. This feels to me like a pretty important thing. And
I wasn't asked either. I haven't seen anything, but you just heard tonight where Brian said it would be good to see but
so we haven't been as an organization been formally asked. Okay, thank you. Moving on to a couple of other areas. We heard, I don't remember, it was 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, that there's a possibility, speaking of Fairway Hills, that we might decide not to rebuild all 18 holes. Where are we?
No, I didn't say it was possible we were not. I said that we were exploring different options and different possible considerations. But
so I'm just asking
we're still exploring those.
So there's been no substantive progress on that. Lastly, I've been hearing from longtime Hobbits users staying on the golf theme being very concerned about the food service, not so much the food itself at the Turnhouse, and how it's being managed and everything from poor service. People put in their meal requests 3 different times and don't get it, et cetera, to there's some golf organizations are starting to hold their meal event, mealtime events elsewhere rather than at the Turnhouse as they usually have. So my question about that is, are you aware of these issues?
I haven't received anything related to that.
Okay. I would appreciate you checking with Dan or whoever to see.
Well, I would appreciate you forwarding. You said you've heard. Would you send me something that I can, some names that we can follow up?
Be happy to do that. Well, I'd be happy to. One resident in particular specifically asked to be anonymous, but I'd be happy to send you the specifics of the issues.
Give me something I can work with, please.
There was also an allegation, you may not know this, may need to follow up with Dan. We've heard from Dan that there were problems with weather-related with the grass growing and rebuilding and so on. To your knowledge, is the grass that's on the fairways at Hobbits the same species of grass that it's always been, or was it a new, different species put on more recently?
We have done some things. We have Bermuda grass on the fairways.
Have we always? Like last year and the year before and the year before?
Yes, last year. Ever since I've been here 4 years, and I think it goes back a while, that we have used Bermuda grass on the fairways. That's another thing that right now we're looking for some ways to rejuvenate that type of grass, but also we're exploring some other types of grass. We're looking at, actually, I think a couple of the staff went to Kentucky looking at some other types of grasses. But Bermuda grass is what we've had for years. Right now, we're looking for a fix for that grass.
So there's a communications snafu in here because, and as always, I mean, it's a big community and not everybody operates on all the facts. There has been at least one allegation that we put on a different kind of grass.
No.
And so, so I wanted to check.
Alan, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That was done back, I don't know whether it was 2004, 2005. There was a decision to replant in Bermuda grass, a number of years ago. And it worked fairly well. There was some discussion then because a lot of the people that live adjacent to the golf course didn't like the fact that the grass turned straw-like in the winter. But it worked well until this year it just, the weather just isn't appropriate for it. Now, I went through the golf course myself a couple weeks ago with one of the superintendents. They are planting several different kinds of grass. They're trying to see what will work better. Apparently, they are trying, what they're thinking about doing from what I heard, this is unofficial, of course, but what they're thinking about doing is a mix of grasses rather than just one kind, so that if one kind is particularly susceptible to the weather that year, others will fill in, so that they're working very hard to figure out what will be the proper mix, what will grow, what will, survive.
Thank you.
Just a correction, it was suggested that this Guilford thing is something recent. I've been hearing about it for several months now. I know Brian and Chris have been talking about it. So it has been, it's been out there, and I agree with Alan. I think this would be an interesting pilot project to just get our feet wet and see what's involved, and it's something we can pull out of if it doesn't work out. But I'd like to see it investigated as a possibility. And the idea that we wait until after the November elections before we do anything, that seems to be kicking the can way down the road. And here's something we can jump into right now and see how it works.
Chuck.
So I want to know what the damage for the Fairway Hill Golf and for the storm, and then that's one question. The other is how much like income loss due to this damage.
Well, I can't give you, I don't know the
Any
numbers.
estimation?
We know right now we're only using, I think we're only using 9 of the 18 holes because of the boardwalk and the bridges. I don't know the revenue loss. There's some numbers we can follow up on. But we are moving forward to replacing the boardwalk and the bridges.
Jenny.
Are we working with the golf committee on this whole issue of the restaurant at Hobbits Glen? Because it keeps coming up,
You know, Jenny, they have made significant strides.
That's
There's
what
a
I
few
heard,
who will complain about the price. They will complain about other things, but I can tell you, Turnhouse are miles ahead, and they've made considerable strides. I have not had anything come directly to me about the food. I have had contact about the condition of the fairways, but nothing about the food.
Lynn.
Hi. I have several friends who are intense golfers over there, and some of them have been complainers over there too. From what I hear this year is that they are pleased with the changes that the Turnhouse has made in terms of they have a small menu specifically for annual members. So it's, the special sandwiches, special smaller things that they can pick up and take out. They seem to be, the people I have heard from seem to be very satisfied with that. I think this is an ongoing kind of conversation. Nobody will ever be 100% satisfied. I think that, again, from what I hear from my intense golfing friends, that it's much better. They feel like at least people are working, the restaurant is working with them and, offered a very different menu this year than there was last year.
Well, that's what I thought, but then we're hearing that the golfers are going elsewhere to eat, so totally. Okay.
Who's the representative on the golf committee, the Golf and Greens committee this year?
No, I am this year.
That's what I thought.
Maybe
We haven't met yet.
All right.
I went over there and did my golf course tour and talked to some people
Or maybe you can get a sense at the next meeting about where the golf community is with the Turnhouse.
Okay. Report the Rubber Trust. Any questions in writing? Any questions? Dick, I'm in charge.
Any progress on the butterfly at this point?
No, we have not done anything further on the butterfly at this point.
Okay, go on.
No, but we are, again, that is very much on our radar. I think it's most important right now to get the paths set to really continue with the programming that we're doing. I think, if you look at the schedule of events that are taking place this year, and we're getting really great feedback. We had 3,000 people, sign up for the kids' events this Sunday. There were 2 different events. They were very successful. I think the Chrysalis Cabarets will really be fun. I missed the first one, but the next one is July 7th, I think. It's Count Basie sort of jazz band on the Chrysalis.
Yeah, I was over there for Lou Dutro's retirement party a couple of weeks back, and Went very well. It went
So,
very smoothly.
You know, we're really very happy with, you know, what we've done is with this new management company. We're very happy with what they've been doing this year. I think things are working much, the production of things is working much more smoothly. And we've been meeting regularly with CA, with the county, with Howard Hughes now, really trying to, you know, set up protocols for the park. I think the county is acutely aware of the issues with Wine in the Woods, and hopefully we'll be getting more support for a path there too. So.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned this county involvement. Your report said you've been working with the county, and was that have anything to do with the pathways, or was that just the damage?
Again, that's with like Wine in the Woods, especially, and with, you know, the restoration that was needed after Wine in the Woods, that kind of thing. So we work with them.
So they're not involved in the pathway thing?
No.
Okay.
Not at this point.
Sorry?
I had one other question. I heard a rumor, and I'm hoping that you can deny that this is true. Someone told me that Nina was not being paid.
Again, this is a, you know, Nina, there is a salary line dedicated for Nina. She is taking it at her discretion. She was just paid this week.
Okay. So she's up to speed.
Again, I think this is a board situation. She isn't. She's not received all of the compensation due her.
Okay.
But that again is at her election as the CEO.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
I just had a quick question about what the cost associated with the grass. I saw so much of, you know, this year yet again. We had that downpour, which we seem to have every year now in May.
Right.
So I just wanted to find out what the cost of replacing the grass. It seemed to be so extensive this year. Do you have any idea?
And this is something that is done. The parties responsible for, you know, the injury to the park are also responsible for fixing it. Unfortunately, we had two events. One was the county event, Wine in the Woods. The other was Capitol Jazz. 2 weekends apart, both in deluges. You know, so both did extensive damage. Parties are all working together to assign, you know, to what the participation is in fixing all of this. And again, it's a situation that, and this is why we're talking to, this is why we're working so closely with the county too. They understand this is their program. It's a requirement really for the trust to do this. So, you know, how can we make this better for the park?
All right, I think that's.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Sure.
I just wanted to say, I think the other thing is, I don't know if this is on the schedule yet for next year, but maybe folks ought to be looking at shifting the time when these events are going to be held. If this is a new pattern that's being established, I know things get locked in very early, but maybe, you know, since we're seeing this consistently, we ought to be thinking about shifting those dates. Just a suggestion.
I certainly thought of that as I was sloshing around in the mud and walking through the rain.
I bet.
I think the county is reluctant to shift it because there are other counties that have similar wine events at different times. But again, these are all things that work out. Capitol Jazz, again, that's not we don't schedule that either. Unfortunately, both those events are not our events. They're on our land, but they're not our events. So, you know, but we certainly will be putting more prohibitions on the use of the property, on how things will be used. You know, especially where there's the most damage. We're considering, you know, even blocking off parts of the park, you know, in a regular schedule for, you know, so they can rest.
Yeah.
Not have people walk on them, not have people slog through them. So, you know, just again as part of the maintenance and restoration.
Dick?
Well, I'm glad to hear that you are addressing that problem because it really did
Oh.
get pretty awful. Are there drainage issues here that could be looked into, or I mean,
I think the topography of the park has been pretty well studied, and yeah, there are drainage issues. That one area, sort of in the center of the park, it's you can see the wetlands. We actually tried to fence that off this year, so nobody could go in there. But there's some real low-lying areas, especially right in the middle.
Could we be putting culverts in or piping or drains or anything like
I'm not an engineer. I have no idea, but I know that really we've had a lot of different people looking at that and looking at just what's going to
I
work.
suspect we're going to get more of these heavy rains. It's been the pattern this year and last couple of years. So I hope that when you're talking to these people, you will ask them to take a look at the drainage issues and see if there are ways we can get the water out of there.
Oh,
faster.
absolutely. And again, we're just trying to keep people out of those areas too. It's really important. Again, for so many years, the park was just there. And people just went in and did what they wanted, when they wanted. Nobody stopped them. Nobody questioned them. So it's been a learning process for all kinds of institutions in terms of what can and cannot be done in this land area, what can be done to best maintain it, improve it.
Okay, thank you.
Any?
Yeah, are you working with Dennis on this plan?
Yes.
How long do you think it'll take, one, to restore the land before you get another big event, and two, to come up with a plan? Because it could be different things.
I'll defer to Dennis on that.
Yeah.
Dennis?
So our plan is to come to the board in October with a long-term management process or plan for Symphony Woods. So we had IAT, and I think the whole alphabet soup of parties that are part of the downtown. Had our first meeting maybe 10 days ago with the assessment of the woods. And the next step is to talk about how we manage it going forward to preserve it.
Now, that doesn't quite answer her question, though, because her question was, how long do you think it's going to take to restore it?
It depends on how you use it in the weather.
Right.
There are so many variables. As it sits right now, it's really hard to guess when that might be, because it's really not in great shape in terms of the infrastructure, what's underneath what's there. So it's a much longer discussion, but I think some significant changes have to be made, drainage, possibly irrigation, and then looking at a different turf type that's more of a sports field turf than what we have there now. And then you could have events ongoing throughout the year. But right now, as it sits, it really doesn't support the events that are in place if we have any kind of bad weather. And the question is, what's the new normal?
Exactly.
So thank you. You may have said it and I may have missed it, but I've heard you talking about staggering use, letting it sit, letting this area sit, we're using that. What I hadn't heard, and if you said it, I apologize, I didn't hear it. Have you also looked at what activities make sense to go on there? Just because they've got, just as an example, I don't have any conclusion about it. Just because Wine in the Woods has happened there for X number of years, doesn't mean it ought to happen there. We looked at the impact various activities have. And
we certainly
whether they ought
have.
to be.
Again, something like Wine in the Woods is not in our control. When the county put the money into the construction of the park and the chrysalis, Wine in the Woods was written into that agreement. That is an annual event that we have agreed to have with the county. Now, again, the county is very aware of the issues because they then have to pay to restore them. So that the timing and the restoration is, again, they are the drivers of that.
Can I say something on this? It's something I've, got upset about, and Nina's worried about this as well. It's not, Wine in the Woods has been doing its thing. The problem, for years, the problem, in my view, is that when you have large trucks driving through the park, pulling large stages behind them, okay? And this year they tried to put these mats down, but That didn't really do much at all. Okay, that's what, if you ask my opinion, we shouldn't have tractor trailers pulling large stages in those kind of conditions.
So what's our leverage, your leverage?
Well,
So
we're
Line
looking
in the
at-
Woods needs to happen. Does that mean it needs to happen the way it's always happened, or could we put
We are
restrictions on it?
trying to, we are working with the county, and that's part of the thing about, again, they want to mitigate this as much as we do because they know they're responsible for this. We have tried very hard to control the traffic, that goes, the setup in and out of the park. We have people there, almost 24/7 watching to see what's done. People are used to doing their own thing, and we have now become the policemen to try to control and stop it. It's a difficult process, but I think we're making headway.
Where we're not making headway, perhaps, is with IMA. Okay, they're the ones, the primary pullers, and they're people they contract with to put stages in there. We have an agreement with them requiring them to provide us a logistics plan before every event. Okay, and one thing I've
Do you get to approve it, or do they just have to provide one?
No, we have to
approve it. And so one thing I've said is we need to, and Nina's all over this. It's nothing like I came up with this, but just one of the things I'd like to see us do is insist upon a contingency plan for bad weather that says, okay, if this happens, this is your plan, because you can't, again, just in my mind, we cannot have tractor trailers. I said it looks like a tractor pull happened out there, and Nina says, well, that's pretty much what it was.
Substitute a mud run for the thing.
Yeah, right. And so, it's one of the things that I hope we're able to do is that you asked what leverage. That may be some leverage we have is our ability to, or our authority to approve those logistics plans, to insist on more in them before we approve them.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Consent agenda. All approved. Minutes May 24th, BOD in the closed meeting. Board votes. Okay.
I actually have a question here. So what's the reason we're adding something acting in good faith? So because somebody didn't act in good faith before for that?
No.
That's the one. Like board resolution indemnify fiduciary of the Columbia Association Corporation.
That's where we're going right now.
Yeah, so is it on the same agenda, right?
No, it's on
No,
the board
it's
votes
on the
agenda.
board. It's on the board.
The consent.
Milton, anything you want to say about it? Yeah, we talked about it at the work session, and so we have the resolution, before us. Milton?
Susan, anything you want to add?
The only thing I would add is the phrase "acting in good faith." I think was a suggestion of some board members to just acknowledge that that's appropriate language. That if someone's acting in good faith, making the best effort that they have the skill and intent and knowledge to do, that should be included. They should be indemnified for that purpose. So nothing has ever happened that precipitated this. This was, if you were, I don't know if you were there last time, but that this was a practice suggested by our 401k advisor and also the Benefits Council as best practice, and they were both surprised that we didn't have it already in place. It's not like there was an issue that occurred that prompted it.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So we meet periodically with these folks and review the plan. It's a constant effort to make it better.
Is that the only change that was
Yes.
made to the? Because I thought what I remember was we were going to say essentially substitute acting in good faith for any negligence. We were going to take the negligence part out and say pretty much, look, if you're acting in good faith, we're going to indemnify you. And so what I thought was going to go was the gross negligence piece of it as well.
I didn't have that in my notes, but we missed that.
Okay, because I remember talking about it as essentially giving team members well, who's this going to apply to? Fiduciaries.
Video,
Yeah, giving them a break is saying, look, don't be too worried, sort of making it easier on them. But what this essentially done is put another hurdle for them to prove. They got to prove they're acting in good faith. I mean, I remember trying to make it more friendly to our fiduciaries, and this, I'm worried, doesn't do that because it leaves negligence in there. You know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying.
Could I ask a follow-up question that's related to that? And I'm looking at you being a lawyer. It says gross negligence. And I'm wondering, I know when you add on words to things, it can legally change their meaning. Can somebody act in good faith but still commit gross negligence?
Yeah.
They can't, okay.
You can. What I would definitely want to keep in there, willful misconduct. Oh, yeah, we're not going to indemnify you for willful misconduct. But you could, someone could just make the most harebrained decision, but they're really trying to do the best that he or she can. And it's just, and later on in 2020 hindsight, it looks stupid. You're just like, what on earth? And my thought in proposing acting in good faith was that, no, look, time out. If someone is really doing the best he or she can, and it turns out later looking back that, gosh, that was just really idiotic, I would still be willing to indemnify that person. That's what I thought I was trying to do in here, not really adding another requirement for them to show that they acted in good faith.
I know that the wording wasn't specifically discussed last time, so it's not like we actually specifically amended it. So I'm open to whatever the board was.
Well,
Okay.
Once there's a motion made, you can make an amendment to remove those words.
Well, I can if it's wise, because maybe you're right, because I thought we were going to, essentially that's the way it left, where staff was going to take it back and sort of figure out how to do the wording in this, and maybe this is the best, maybe they looked at what other people do, and this is the wise course of action, but I just don't remember this being exactly what I was thinking of.
All right. Is there a motion? First, is there a motion to adopt the resolution? Dick moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And Janet second. Okay, now we can, if we want to make changes. Okay, Janet.
I guess I'm struggling to understand how someone could act in good faith and still have gross negligence. Because to me, gross negligence implies that you were so apathetic about it that you just didn't give it two thoughts, and therefore you made a bad decision. So to me, I don't really see that as I see that as a fairly high hurdle to have to meet to be guilty of gross negligence. But I have a hard time. I'm just trying to think of how you could act in good faith but not and still be grossly negligent.
Well, I tell you what it does. What it causes is a discussion about whether the person's negligence is gross or it's just mere negligence. Is it, there's a spectrum of negligence, and so it forces the person to, well, maybe my negligence was really here, and then someone says, no, that was just really idiotic. You didn't care. You were apathetic. You must have been apathetic, because anyone with a half a brain would never have done that. Getting this thing. And my feeling was, no, take that off the table and just say, if a person's doing the best he or she can, we're going to indemnify them. What maybe I'll just throw out another option, recklessness, right? I don't want someone to be acting recklessly, right? And so if you want to put willful misconduct or recklessness, I could agree with that, but I just didn't want to get into this discussion of negligence.
Milton's next.
I guess, Susan, for me, we're trying to catch up with best practice. And Greg, I don't have a problem with gross negligence because, number one, I guess I look at it good or bad. We're talking about individuals acting on behalf of the association for a $36 million incentive plan. And yes, anything, I want to make sure that first that's protected. And so to me, gross negligence has a different connotation. It's almost like you're doing something intentionally.
Okay, Alan and then Chow.
No, yeah, I guess I think I can agree with that. And I guess for me, there's also the issue of these aren't just, I didn't count how many people, these aren't just 4 or 5 people that are off the street that are good Samaritans that we want to hold blameless. These are people that we assume trust have particular skills and are expected to act not just in good faith, but in good faith according to the I don't know I have no idea what the legal words would be, but according to the dictums of their profession, according to sort of what a not just what any reasonable person would do, but what a reasonable person who is entrusted with, as you say, a 30 whatever million dollar plan would do. And that is in itself a higher standard to me.
Plus, you're also talking about participants in the plans, because all of them are their team members.
Joe.
So I have one question. If there's a vote coming from the person, the volunteer, right, or the committee member for this one, there's yes or no, and he pressed the wrong button, what's the consequence for that? So is it a yes or vote no? And he probably thought about yes, but he pressed the wrong button, no button. What's the consequence of that?
No, pressing no button.
I just think about the situation, right? There's a yes or no vote, right? The person thought about it, he would vote yes, but he pressed the no button. What is the consequence for that?
It's not.
What is the consequence for that?
It's not buttons, they're
Is
voting
it
yes or no.
gross negligence or?
Well, if I may, keep in mind that these individuals, they're not acting in a vacuum. We have financial advisors,
Sure.
everyday individuals who work outside of CA who are advising them.
Sure.
And so when they get to a point of making the decision, I want to believe they have vetted it with the financial advisor,
Sure.
and they have information they need to make that decision.
So my question: if they know they made a mistake, like press the wrong button or made it wrong vote.
There's no buttons to press.
Yeah, it's analogy, right?
If
They
they
just-
said no when they meant yes?
Yes. So what happens?
If they
What's
say-
the consequence of that?
Okay, there's
Based on the situation.
Yeah, I think it would depend on the nature of the situation, and it would have to take that person's votes weighing the whole majority, right?
Mhm.
So if one person, if everybody else says yes and that person meant to say yes and they say no,
Mhm.
or if it's split and that person says no and it sways, there would be a lot of discussion about that. And also the financial advisor is a plan fiduciary as well, so they're very vested in making sure that
Sure,
this
sure,
is done well.
sure.
So what is the consequence? It depends on the effect of that mistake.
I guess child is just like a financial bad example, good example. It's just like being given information about a particular mutual fund, and then you make the decision in August, and then in December that mutual fund goes bottom up. But you made the decision at the time with the information you had.
No. The difference is that I said this is the volunteer position, right?
What?
No.
No.
It's
Well, these are employees.
These
who
are
volunteer.
employees that are-
But it's still volunteer, right?
What's your definition of volunteer?
I mean, not a
They
paid.
could resign from this committee.
Yes.
It's their choice. We would not make anyone serve on that. Is that what you mean?
No. My point is, you are not paying for them to sit in the committee, right? At least.
Well, it's part of their job now because they.
Child, you look at if you look at who's sitting on there. We have our director of finance and our treasurer. We have our comptroller.
Sure.
Those are the
Yeah,
individuals
I
probably
definitely
more so
understand.
than anyone else in the organization. Susan is on it.
Sure. I definitely understand that. I think I remember several times ago, our senators press the wrong button when they press the vote, right? That happens. My point is, because they are volunteer on the committee, which kind of consequence if they made a mistake, right? We're adding something there and we're trying to.
Be reflected in their job appraisal and their performance appraisal. So if someone made
Okay.
that kind of mistake, so whether how bad that would be depends on the
I see.
nature of the.
Doesn't indemnification mean that something financially bad happened and has to be made right? So if there's 5 people voting and only one erroneously votes the wrong way, no financial.
But it's a 2-3, right? It's a critical vote. What happened, right?
Anthony Kennedy was on.
Ask a question.
Great.
Susan, can you give us maybe 1 or 2 examples of the types of things that could lead to potential liability for a fiduciary?
Investment selection is a great example. Let's see, what else is not paying close enough attention to the fees. That's a big deal in the whole defined, contribution plan arenas. What are the fees?
Okay.
Those are two big examples.
And so the people that could essentially seek some type of redress would be the plan beneficiaries, right?
The participants.
Participants, and they say, "Gee, you guys made these. It's just an awful decision."
Mhm.
I mean, if this is essentially the best practice, I guess I could accept it. But there, may be times where let's say I'm on this committee, and the advisor says do X, and I disagree.
Right. Right.
I'm allowed to disagree.
Absolutely.
Okay. But then 6 months later, it goes bottom up, and then someone tells me, you were grossly negligent. How on earth could you have disagreed with the professional advisor who was telling you to do exactly the opposite? I'm like, no, that's not supposed to work that way. I'm allowed to disagree. And so, sort of like a question like, Chow, what if I do disagree and it doesn't turn out, or it goes completely wrong? And let's say there's a majority, 3 people, whatever it is, and they decide to disagree with the advisor. I could see that being very easily characterized as gross negligence, and they would not be protected under this. You know what I mean?
I do. I understand.
And so, to me, I'll just bring up. I'm not going to debate this, but that's why, again, I think gross negligence should be out of this. I think, yes, we should not indemnify people for their willful misconduct, recklessness, but my takeaway, just to bring this up, I move that we substitute the phrase recklessness for gross negligence in this document.
I second. Dick.
I look at this term gross negligence, and I think there's I think it would cover things like, let's say somebody knew that there were some red flags on an investment and withheld that information. That would, to me, to be gross negligence. Recklessness is kind of hard to define because a committee could decide that maybe there is a risk involved in a certain investment, but the rewards are so great that the risk is viable. That's a difficult thing to determine. But there are things that I think could be called gross negligence, and that was one example: withholding information.
But they wouldn't have the information. I mean, they're.
Well, let's say you knew that there was a problem with a particular investment and you did not inform your fellow board members.
That sounds like willful misconduct.
Yeah.
You want? Well, okay.
If you're saying you knew and you made a conscious decision, I'm not going to disclose this information. That sounds willful, not just.
It could be careless.
Let's do.
So
Alan and Ginny.
So I'm looking at the legal dictionary, and they do equate gross negligence with willful negligence. Gross negligence or willful willful misconduct. That both are equated.
They're
means
not.
means any act or failure to act by a person that was intended to cause or was in reckless disregard of or wanton indifference to the harmful consequences to the safety of the property of another person, which the person acting or failing to act should have exercised better care for. So, and they say as compared, it is considered that it is conduct that is extreme when compared with ordinary negligence, which is a mere failure to exercise reasonable care.
Ginny.
I didn't know if Alan's finished.
I'm done.
I have a real concern about trying to vote on this tonight, and it doesn't have to be voted on tonight from what I understand. I would prefer that staff heard all these comments and that they go talk to their advisors, whoever that is, and get some opinion and come back to us again, because I would hate to vote on anything when we may or may not know what we're doing.
So this was drafted by our outside benefits
I
council?
understand that, but you heard a lot more, and my point is, I don't want to use the word table, but let's send it back to staff, or I'll just abstain, whatever.
Those are very different actions.
I just don't think, I have a sense we really know what the answer is.
Alan, and then Milton.
I could agree with that. I guess the one thing that I heard you say, and maybe I misinterpreted it, if we are holding people, whatever the word is, blameless is maybe not the right word, but whatever. But I also heard you say it would be their performance appraisal would be impacted, which doesn't sound like we're holding them. I mean, we're not saying you got to pay back the money or you're going to be. We're not going to cover you if you're sued, but it still feels like we're saying on the one hand we're holding you. What's the word? I'm blocking on the word. What's the word we're talking about here?
Almost.
Blameless or whatever, but now we're going to slap you another way. That just doesn't sit well with me. So I just want to be understood.
What I like, if I may, I would like to recommend, could we just, the board, just postpone the vote on it?
Mm-hmm.
We'll capture your comments. We'll take it back to our outside legal counsel, and also Sherry will be at the board meeting on the 26th of July when we can bring it back for a vote.
Fine with me.
Does anybody else have any other comments on it? Okay, so it's just that issue, that area is there. All right, so we'll bring it up in July meeting. All right.
So you waving all those motions off the table?
It's a motion to table this until the July meeting.
Second that.
All right, all those in favor of just tabling to the July meeting? Unanimous. So we'll table it to the July meeting. Okay, updates to board reimbursement policy. So basically, you see the changes highlighted in red, or whatever color it comes up at. Any questions? So there's a motion to adopt the new reimbursable expense policy, the modified.
Second.
Who? Ginny moved. Is there a second? Nancy seconded. All right. Any discussion? Alan.
I'm looking, for example, at Roman numeral 2A 4, and what was added in there was in some instances, and that sounds like an opportunity for some people to get a benefit and other people not to.
I think that's always clearly stated ahead of time. A ticket for you and you don't get.
It depends on how many tickets we get, right?
Okay, I guess. Okay.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to adopt this system? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, the next one is motion regarding resident speak out and board to remove that restriction. Is there a motion to adopt that? Alan moved, Dick seconded. Sorry, Dick seconded.
Okay.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. All right. We're on to the 2020 draft budget schedule. Milton, anything you want to say?
Susan?
So,
Well said.
So you at your seats are the budget documents for that we just finished. I can't believe we're talking about the next set schedule, but we are. So this is the second year's schedule. This is a little bit lighter. It has, because the board conditionally approved the FY20 budget in February 2018. It still has, I think, a pretty robust calendar of opportunity for public and stakeholder input. I think it's pretty clear as to what each deliverable is or will be, or what will happen at each event. It's very similar to the FY18 second year schedule, and that one had some events added for more public input than prior ones. So, are there any questions? Or?
Yeah.
Jenny, and then Alan.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to read this real fast. Thursday, September 27th, and Thursday, October 11th on the agenda. I'm just trying to read it quickly. It looks like on the 27th, it's only the village associations and then the public on Thursday, October 11th, or did I read it too quickly?
Well, they're all open
Why?
to the public, and so that, and it's for anyone, but it's just a special opportunity to make sure that the village associations know that this is open to them and would be dedicated to them, but anyone's welcome to, they're all public meetings.
I think the way it's worded, the average person wouldn't think that they could testify.
Okay.
I don't understand why we can't allow for just testimony, and if we need 2 nights for testimony, then we have it. Because it's possible somebody's out of town one night, like, the public testimony, but they would be in town the week before. So my question is, do we need 2 nights for public input? If we do, I think it should be open to anybody that signs up, first come, first serve. That's just my 2 cents. Anybody want to add a nickel to that? Or?
That's more than your 2 cents.
Alan.
It's a small thing, but it was important enough that it was on here, so I'd like us to get it accurate. Several times it says the board chair will track the time for each speaker, and we have a policy that our vice chair tracks the time
Oh, okay.
for each speaker. So if we're going to have that, let's have it correct.
Huge.
That?
It's on there. So
I'm pretty sensitive to
Okay.
that.
You can sleep better tonight, right?
It's a little possessive.
he's got his signs. He needs to be able to use his signs.
He really likes this.
Let's put the blame where it really belongs, okay?
More significantly, I would like to see us add at the beginning of this process, and it could be a part of the July 12th work session, I would like to see us add a discussion at a higher level of what we're trying to accomplish with this budget. What are the overall principles? What are the values? And we could get it, if staff wants to put forth your basic sense of what are it is not only a truism, but I believe true, that a budget is the operational reflection of the values of an organization and the priorities. And I think we've gotten ourselves in Dutch several times and taken more time to actually have the discussions on where we're going, on what we're going to do, because we haven't had the beginning discussion of sort of what the end goal is and why and that sort of thing. And when it's just, let's have a budget, it doesn't provide us much. If it says staff will provide information on alternatives, but there's no criteria for how to analyze those alternatives and how to decide what alternative makes more sense. So I would like to see us have that discussion in this process at the beginning. That's my 2 cents.
Great.
I'll see your 2 cents. And
Raise me a plug nickel.
I understand what you're saying, and while that sounds so great, it just ends up being a very lengthy, heartfelt discussion from a lot of people who care. Don't get me wrong, but we end up with a lot of things like, do good things for residents and support Columbia associations, programs and services, keep our buildings in good working order. We end up with these big things that do very little to change the outcome, I feel, of the budget, because almost anything can qualify for one of those principles that we'll end up coming up with. That's my only problem with it.
Could I respond to that?
Well,
let Greg finish.
Yeah, you definitely can. There was I thought, a late in the game discussion earlier this year, from Chow that started having to do with the annual charge. Right now, there's discussion on here for the annual charge. I think it's one of the first couple things. But I'm trying to think, was there anything else like that at the end last year, I'm going through my notes, that we wanted to try to get our arms around early on instead of waiting until the end, where it becomes really difficult to try to deal with them. The one I remember is Chow, and I brought up some membership things.
Grants.
Were there anything else like that where it would make sense to take them up early on?
Could I just do a quick response to that? Because
All right, Alan and then Jerry.
I want to have the discussion to avoid what you were saying, because for me, it's not about those big picture things. It's more nitty gritty. What are we going to prioritize? If we had to choose, what are we going to prioritize? Putting money into buildings or putting money into paths? Or, as we think of what do they call them, budget resolutions or whatever that Congress does. What's the big pie? Here's our big pie. What are our priorities in terms of where we're going to stick money? Not just grandiose things, but really nitty gritty. Which things are priorities for us?
Sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think Greg is alluding to, and it has to do with establishing objectives. So I think that's the thing that we're talking about. What is the objectives that are associated with this next budget? And I think one of the things is this has to do with policy. How much is going into, for example, stream remediation? Do we need to have a policy statement about how much of the budget is going to be devoted to that? Or do we want to have a cap? Or do we want to have some percentage? Or there are lots of ways that you can gain some control over this if you look at it from a policy perspective. So to that angle, I think that might be worthwhile to take a look at, are there areas where we need to examine policy in relation to the budget based on our previous experience? So I think that would be an interesting discussion to have if people can frame it in terms of objectives, or do you think there needs to be a policy statement around this area? And let's do that prior to this first July 12th.
Oh, well, we can't do it prior to July 12th, because that's when the first time we're going to discuss.
All right, that's the next.
Well, I mean, people could get ideas out
Think
prior
about things.
to that meeting.
Yeah. Ginny?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying and Alan's saying and Greg, and my problem in being only my not quite second year starting on this budget, I would like to hear from the staff what they, in their experience day by day, and they really know what's going on, they think the needs are, and they express it through a budget. It doesn't mean we have to vote for it, agree on it, but that would give me a sense of what's really important, what's a priority, what's an emergency, what's if we don't do the building's going to fall down or something like that, or open space, we're going to have some serious problems, whatever it is. And I agree with you on the stream thing. I've been trying to get the board to agree on telling staff they've got to do a study on stream erosion. But anyway, so I have a problem doing what Alan's saying, even though intellectually it sounds great right now, because I want to hear from the staff. Two, I want to hear from the public what they think the needs are, and then come up with what I think is reasonable, and each one of us will do that, as to what really is needed and how much it'll cost. And then almost you can write that beginning part of it. I know it sounds a little backwoods, but I'd have a problem doing that right now, saying only X amount goes to open space. That's our philosophy, because it may be we are going to be in real trouble if we don't put Y amount in there. I don't know. I just couldn't do it right now, but it's a great idea.
I'm going through this, and I'm not seeing any decision points. We're getting input, and people are talking about it, and we're getting input, and we're talking about it, and then all of a sudden, on February 28th, we're voting on a budget. Shouldn't we be creating a budget during this process?
No. Remember, this is
a 2-year.
We did a conditional budget.
We did a conditional
So
budget.
what we're looking at is changes to the conditional budget.
Okay.
So we're not doing a new budget.
No, I know that. I'm saying we have a conditional budget.
Yep.
We're getting all this input, and then it looks like it's a yes or no vote on Thursday, the February 28th. For what? I mean, I don't see where we've plugged in changes along the way that we want to changes that we want to make to the conditional budget. On February 28th, are we going to go over this line by line and vote on it, or where are we going to decide what the changes are that we're voting?
It's Milton and Susan and then
I
Sharon.
guess for me, I've been part of organizations where they've had 2-year or biannual budget process. This is more steps in a biannual budget. What the board seems to be talking about, you want an annual budget process, because this is what you're doing is almost recreating, almost developing a new budget for 20, which you've already approved conditionally.
No, that's not what I'm saying. We have a conditional budget, and we're talking about changes to the budget. We're getting a lot of input, but on this final, then all of a sudden we're voting on, but what are we voting on? That's what I want to know. How are we going to decide which changes we want to put into this budget?
Look at January 10.
All right.
Yeah, I think what Dick is talking about, the decision point that I see is July 26, where the board discusses and votes on the annual charge rate. And so we have the initial discussion on July 12th, and then we vote on July 26th. And I think what we're saying here is that may not be enough time to do any analysis along the lines of policy. Do we want to make any changes based on our analysis of the previous year's budget? So I'm not saying, Milton, that you start all over. I certainly would God, I certainly would not want to do that. But the input that's coming is months and months and months and months after that annual charge, but I think there was some interest in looking at the annual charge in greater depth and also the policy implications of the all-over pie that we've established as part of that 2-year process. So maybe we need to simply shift that vote so that we have a little more time to do some kind of analysis or ask some questions or bring up some issues or give the staff time to give some input prior to taking that vote.
Kind of thought that's what we were supposed to be doing on July 12th. That's why it's on for discussion. It's focused on the annual charge and the cap, and what would the board like? As Greg alluded, there were I'll say there were generally 2 issues I understood coming out of the last budget. One was the annual charge and what should we set it at, and the second had to do with membership, which we will address.
I think there was
also.
a third on the grants. We had a lot of discussion about, rather than having all the grants put in, they should have a majority vote to vote them in. There was a lot of discussion about that.
No, I thought the discussion was on should we basically vote? Should there be a positive vote for each?
Any change?
Right,
Any
that's
change.
what I'm saying.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, not just
Right. Yeah, but that's not the budget itself.
Oh, well, no, that's
Right.
And
That's
do
not
you
the
think
budget
one
itself.
night is enough to allude to objectives or any shifts in objectives or do you see any policy statements coming up within that second year after the budget has been voted on and established? Because then we're locked in. Then we're locked into whatever we vote on the 26th.
Okay, so you asked me my opinion on this.
Yeah.
So what I look at in terms of the July discussion and vote is setting the big parameter, which is the annual charge. That's where our money comes from, okay? And my thought is, if we are going to make a change in the annual charge or cap, whatever, plus or minus or whatever, that has got to be decided as early in the process as possible because if you want the whole budget to be built, I mean that's it. That's the driver, and so that's why it's in July. It's like, okay, board, and that's why it's annual charge and cap. That's the big thing. What are you going to set it at? Tell staff how to go back and build the budget because everything else comes after that. And so that's what I see happening in July, just a focus on the annual charge, the cap. That's the big thing. Now, we have a variety of policies throughout the year. I mean, we have a policy on dredging lakes, and we have a policy on ponds, and all those have costs. And eventually, we'll probably have a policy on stream erosion. But all those have costs. But what happens, in my view, is when it comes budget time, all those policies, when you look at them, have costs, and then it's up to the board at that time to kind of say, well, we can't afford to do 3 ponds this year. We can only afford to do 1 pond, okay, because of extenuating circumstances. But that's the type of decision you make at the budget time when you're presented with, man, I can't afford 3 ponds. If I do 3 ponds, then I can't do stream restoration or something, or I can't do pathway, And that's really for the board. That's really for each individual board that you come up to say, we have these needs. These are the proposed changes. How do you want to balance them? That was all I had. All right, let's see. I know it was Alan and Dick and Ginny.
A couple of things. I would have agreed with you about what you just said until you just said it, and not because of what you said, but it triggered something for me. What that ends up being is a self-imposed can't afford.
Yes.
It's like me saying, I know I'm going to need a new roof. I'm going to set a limit of $4,000 for my new roof. And then I can only afford Joe whatever who doesn't know what he's doing with half-rate materials. Now, I got more money in the budget bank, or I've got other sources of money that I'm not tapping, but I've already set this limit, and so therefore I can't afford it. Seems to me this is an excellent opportunity for some discussion about the cap and the rate and what it ought to be. But as we go through the budget, I would want it to be a very active discussion to say, well, we're saying we want to do, just to keep up with your example, we want to do 3 ponds and something on stream erosion. And if we're going to do that, that means we're going to have to raise the rate to 2.3, whatever, I forget the numbers. So now we're faced with the discussion of, if that really is what we want, do we think we can sell that to the community, and does that make sense, and can we make that case and therefore go forward with it, not be limited by a decision we made back in July before we've even looked at what our priorities are. So I think it's an important discussion to have. I don't want to be limited to that. So that's point number 1 for me. The other issue for me is what happens between October 11th and January 4th. And I understand that we have a couple of meetings that we don't have during those times. At least that's how we've set up our schedule. But somehow we've got all this input from the community. And somehow all of a sudden a summary of proposed changes shows up for us at the start of the new year. It doesn't say, does that mean every proposed change that every stakeholder has suggested shows up, that here's the whole list? Or is this vetted through the staff to here's the ones we recommend? We've had, and is that enough time for us to then have a real discussion of all these proposed changes, or not? So it feels like there's this fire hose, and all of a sudden we're very quickly trying to narrow it without enough time. And I think we got 2 months there we could use better. Dick?
Alan, thank you. I took a look at Thursday, January 10th, and this is a work session, and we're holding straw votes. I'm real uncomfortable with that. These should be real votes, because this is what's going to get locked in to our proposed budget. So I don't like this straw vote thing. I mean, when we have our next meeting on Friday, February 1st, is this a regular meeting where we can actually vote to approve those straw votes or something? I mean, are we going to formalize this in some way? Or are we going to create a budget based on a work session?
Kenny?
Yeah, two things. One, I'm very comfortable with doing the annual charge at the beginning because I see it as the budget's based on X charge. And if we approve that, then we continue to go along with that. If at some point we want to add a whole bunch of things, then we have to be prepared to increase that. But if we decrease it early, staff has to, it's a revenue loss. So staff has to go back and cut things or recommend cuts to the budget, et cetera, or we have a responsibility to say, since it's a revenue loss of X amount of dollars, we're suggesting this be cut or that be cut. So I would rather just see where the board is early in July as to whether you really want to do anything or just keep the annual charge the same. It makes a big difference. If you get a majority of the board going one way or the other, you need to know that early. The other thing about straw votes, I don't have any problem with straw votes as long as we understand what it means, because it gives staff some guidance that there's a majority of the board that wants to look at X item more in depth and look at these particular things about that X item. In other words, we want staff to do more work. I have no problem with that. But then we have to have a vote after they come back on whether we really want that project to move ahead. So you know, if it's handled properly, I don't think it's a problem.
Great.
No, thanks. Yeah, I think Alan's question about do we get all these various recommendations or proposals? We do, and staff usually writes a little, they summarize it, and they give us a recommendation on what they think ought to happen. I think we've seen that before, and take the straw vote, we've done that in the past too. It's worked pretty well, and for what reasons that Ginny pointed out. Do we have a statement or a policy on what a 2-year budget means? Because as much as I love talking about the budget, I thought the point of it was we weren't going to open the entire box of ills again, and we were going to just do more something along the lines of fine-tuning based upon changed circumstances. I say that because, you know, last year, you know, we spent a lot of time. I don't want to debate the merits of this. Please don't do this. But I'm just saying we've debated the inner arbor and what to do and how. You know, and, you know, we said here's what's going to happen year 1, year 2. I really hope for, that's just one example, but there are other examples too. We don't turn this into a whole nother, you know, slugfest on whether or not we should do in year 2 what we thought about doing last year and it went a certain way. So I just say that, just consider that we are supposed to be using a 2-year budget process that, at least in my view, would seem to be more akin to this being the year of something closer to fine-tuning than throwing the whole thing open again.
And then I'm going to.
I would agree with that last piece. I think that I haven't looked at this in that light, and I don't remember what we did 2 years ago, if this was a similar process or something different. But going by what Greg is saying, it might be interesting to first have the discussion, what we think the changed circumstances are that might have budget implications, and then limit the budget discussion to those areas and the budget input to those areas. I'm not sure who wrote this document, so I'm not sure who to ask this question to.
I did.
Does board on February 1st, Friday, February 1st? First of all, does that really mean Friday? We're supposed to come on a Friday, or was that a misprint?
It's not a meeting. It's a deliverable. It's when you'll get
Oh, it's just
those
okay.
adjustments. Those are the adjustments related
Not
to
a meeting.
interest and
Got it.
inflation.
Okay, so my question on that Friday, February 1st, do the words, quote, board recommended mean the same thing as results of straw votes taken January 10th?
So those board recommended threshold adjustments, those are the interest rate and inflation rate over which that if they change by a margin, and I don't remember what it is, that you approved in July last year, for this budget? If say, if it said that inflation was going to be 3%, it ended up being 5%, we would automatically make an adjustment related to that. So that's all that means for those.
How about the words proposed revisions?
Where's that?
It's the start of the second line on February 1st, including conditional FY20 budget, including proposed revisions. Where do those proposed revisions come from?
Oh, I think that those are all of anything that's come out of your deliberation so far.
Okay, so that means, so am I correct that means that if something had a positive straw vote back on January 10th, it would be included there?
I think that was the intent.
Okay, then I would oppose that for the same reasons Dick was talking about, because I have a different experience than Greg has had. I don't think that process has worked well at all. We hold straw votes, and we say those votes are just straw votes, and work sessions we don't hold votes that have meaning and effect. They're just to take the temperature of the board, and yet then they end up being proposals in a budget, which then require a majority to remove from the budget. And if the board is split 5-5, or if only 8 people show up 4-4, this thing stays in the budget, even though in a meeting a majority of the board hasn't voted for it. So I would be more in favor of a process. I'm trying to think, maybe it was Dick who you said it. Whatever those, and you were talking about the grants, whether they're grants or not, any additions, revisions require a majority vote of the board in a properly called meeting to be included.
So I was going to amend, I was going to propose an amendment that January 24th, 2019, we add in there and just say vote on the proposed changes. Which basically, in essence, is what I'm saying is we do the straw votes, we get it, and then we make them official at the January 24th meeting.
Or not, as the case.
No, or not. I mean, but we'll actually vote. But once again, it's an official board meeting, and it's
January 24th, there's no meeting on January 24th.
There is a meeting.
There is a meeting.
Hasn't been voted to the budget yet.
Right. We do have a meeting on January 24th.
So it would require a majority of the board present to
Majority of the
vote
board
for
present.
for it to move on. Okay. That's
Right. January 24th, we will actually vote on.
Yeah.
I second the motion.
That's fair, thirded.
Okay. So that's the change I'm proposing.
Excellent.
Why, I'm missing something. I don't see a meeting listed as January 24th.
We're adding.
On there, Dick.
We do.
It
We
just
do
hasn't been
have a
devoted to
board
the
meeting on the
budget yet.
24th.
Okay,
I'm
so-
just adding it to this.
Okay, I got you.
But actually, let me go back. This. First off, is there a motion to adopt? No, forget it. We're not going to do that because we're not voting tonight. I forgot. But I'm going to recommend that we do that. So we will vote on this on July 26th, and on the actual adoption of the schedule. Are there any other changes somebody wants to the schedule? But I think that addresses part of the thing.
So we're going to start this before we vote on.
Yeah, because we already have it in the system that July 12th and July 26th, we are going to have the discussion and the vote on the annual charge. I mean, we already said it, but if people want to change, we got to do it now to let staff know. Okay, any other changes? If not, we got that change, and we'll see you at the next one. All right, tracking forms. You see the 2 questions from the board and the 1 question from the residents. Chow?
And I think Milton's reply to me about the contract between the village and the CA, right? He said you want to report back to the board?
I basically, it's a contract, and so we're working on some language, but right now I'm looking at coming to the board in a closed meeting in July.
Yeah, so the board will discuss it.
It's a contract.
We're just waiting to figure out the date.
So what's the deadline for them to sign a mutual contract?
September.
I just wanted to make sure the whole board will be copied on those responses. The entire board will be copied on those responses, or could we be, or could I be? I don't care.
Yeah.
I'd like to also know the outcome of those questions.
Yes.
Which ones?
The 2 on the tracking log.
Okay.
That Greg and Ginny asked.
Any.
If you approve the closed meeting on the 26th, you will have the answer to number one.
Yes.
Number two, yeah, I will ask Milton to make sure that everybody gets a copy of that. I'm sure Milton was going to send that out anyway, give all the interest. Greg.
So,
Greg was next.
I was going to say, for my question, I mean, can this just be amended to add, and other questions per May 31st, 2018 email? Because this looks like all I've asked for is the process for sexual harassment complaints. I mean, that's a document.
Well, Greg, I asked specifically Sherry to write the language because we're gonna talk to you fully on the information we have in closed session.
Okay.
But I didn't want to put a lot out there because it is a closed session.
But that closed session, it's going to include all the questions about the incident and everything else?
Yes, and that's
what.
Okay, as long as that's understood, it's
well, it's understood, and that's what we're planning to present. As I said, once again, there's only limited information I wanted to put on there.
Of course, that assumes the board approves calling it closed meetings. Alan, and then, sorry, Chow was first, I'm sorry.
so another question about the residents request track and log. I didn't see, I got the answer for that. The board didn't get informed what's the problem there or what the response from staff?
I mean, generally, we don't. Generally, it's a resident request and the staff answers it.
I responded to him, I responded to him in writing. He sent me a letter, and we responded to him with the letter.
Okay, so it's not a conflict of interest or mistake, it's just something like
conflict. No, his letter basically outlined he was going through some documents and saw 4 specific things where we spent money, and we responded to them why those dollars were spent.
Alan.
So on that type of issue, my feeling is that if something is important enough to show up on a document that we have in front of us, we should get copied on the response so that we are kept informed.
As I said, I can't explain why that was put on there because the letter came to me and I responded to him.
Okay. Well, that's fine, but somehow it got on the board's resume.
Yeah, as I said, I'll talk to Janet about that. But
yeah. I am, in terms of this sexual harassment process, while I'm absolutely clear that the only way to discuss a particular incident is in closed session, I do not think it's appropriate for us in closed session to discuss what our procedure is. That should be open session. That should be open to everybody. So
we are not discussing our policy.
We
CA's process for investigating and resolving sexual harassment complaints is what it says here. Is that placeholder for a discussion on a particular?
It's limited language for a discussion to be had in closed session.
On a particular incident?
Yes.
Okay. I think we could say that. I get that.
This was the language the general counsel came up with. All right. Valerie, talking points.
The board voted to table approval of a resolution to indemnify fiduciaries of CA's incentive plan to further consider whether or not to include the term gross negligence. The board voted to approve an updated Board of Directors reimbursable expenses policy. The board voted to amend the governing documents to delete limitation on topics in which individuals may speak during resident speak out portion of work sessions. And the board discussed amending the 2020 budget schedule.
Alan.
I think in that question about the indemnify discussion, I would like to see the words willfulness, recklessness, because there were some suggestions that the board had.
One suggestion in the, okay.
That's all right. Moving on. I'd like a motion to hold a closed meeting of the CA Board of Directors after tonight's meeting. Nancy moved, Chow seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. I'd like a motion to hold a closed meeting of the board after the July 26th board meeting. Nancy moved. there a second? Janet seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
The purpose of which is?
We just talked about it.
You just asked about
You
it.
just asked about it.
Want to make sure I got the date.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. All right. So we are adjourned, and we're going to go into a closed session afterwards.